The first Seahawks game I ever watched was the 2003 playoff game against the Green Bay Packers. And the only part I watched was that moment when our quarterback, Matt Hasselbeck, proclaimed during overtime that we want the ball and we're going to score. And naturally, he ended up scoring for the other team. And that was my initiation to the annual rhythm of disappointment all Seattle fans participate in. You know it, I know it. Mariners, ugh. Sonics, just kidding. Anyways, this was also when I first learned about Brett Favre. For non-sports fans, Brett Favre was to football what Mozart was to music. In his accomplished career, he threw over 400 touchdowns, won a Super Bowl, he won 3 back-to-back-to-back MVPs, and most impressively, Brett Favre never missed a single game from 1992 until 2010, which is unthinkable for a guy like me who took a sick day off for preaching last month. I would never survive in the NFL, but Favre, that guy was unlike any other person. This made him beloved in Green Bay and back home in Mississippi, and they treated him like a god. And honestly, that's probably where things started to go wrong. And I just want you to think about this. If you take a 23-year-old kid and all you do is praise him for what he can do on a football field, you say yes to whatever he wants, and for the next 20 years, act like he's the most important person in every room, what do you expect to happen? That kind of treatment doesn't build character. It builds pride. It convinces a person they're above the rules, that they're the exception, not the example. And sadly, that's exactly what played out with Favre. In 2020, it came out that Favre had taken $8 million from the state of Mississippi. And now that's bad enough on its own. But the details are what really makes this story heartbreaking. Over his career, Favre made more than $140 million. And still, he chose to take money from the Mississippi Department of Human Services. These were funds meant for families living below the poverty line. And one example of a recipient is a single mom with 2 kids who qualified for just $260 a month. Meaning, Favre's cut amounted to 30,769 of these sorts of payments. He stole 30,000 checks from the poorest of the poor, and it all started with pride. I started this message with Favre's story because it gives us a window into what the book of Obadiah is all about. It's about pride that leads to harm. Now, chances are you're not all that familiar with Obadiah. There aren't any catchy VBS songs about it. It's never be in a devotional or reading plan or in a nice little cute book. And I'd be shocked if anyone here has a favorite memory verse from Obadiah. But if you do, go ahead and type it into the chat box. I'd love to see it. But this is what makes studying this actually kind of exciting. We get to spend some time in a part of the Bible where we don't usually hang out. And that also gives me some opportunity to nerd out. So I'm glad to be here with you. But before I do that, let me give you the bottom line Obadiah has to teach us today. Here it is. If life is a multiple choice test, pride is always the wrong answer because it inflates our ego, it deflates our empathy, and it harms everyone around us. Now, Obadiah is a prophecy written to a nation called Edom around 587 BC. Scholars are divided when and how, but 587 is generally agreed upon. And if the name Edom sounds familiar, it's because we talked about the founder of this nation just 2 months ago, Esau. You might remember that Esau was given the name Edom because he was red and hairy, while his younger brother Jacob got his name for trying to trip up his brother during birth and then during life, and as you're going to see, even through the generations. And we'll come back to Jacob in a bit, but for now, what you need to know is that Esau's descendants became the Edomites. And in 587 BC, things were going really well for the Edomites. Archaeological evidence suggests their cities were growing and businesses were booming, and you could practically hear KC and the Sunshine Band playing in the markets every afternoon. They were celebrating, and in fact, Edom got so wrapped up in its success that its leaders became overconfident. And here's how Obadiah puts it. The pride of your heart has deceived you, you who live in the clefts of the rock and make your home on the heights, you who say to yourself, who can bring me down to the ground? The Edomites felt untouchable, partly because they literally lived on the heights around Mount Seir, which gave them a strong military advantage compared to their neighbors, but also their geographical location gave them some peace during a time when most of the area was experiencing upheaval. And let me explain this with my beautifully drawn map that I'll have Crystal put up for you right now. So at the time, the Babylonian Empire, and you'll see it circled, was on a mission to rule the known world. That meant taking control of the Mediterranean and putting wannabe empires like Egypt over down here on the west side in their place. And to get there, they had two options. They could head directly west and go through Edom, but as you can see from the map, why would they do that? That meant dragging an army across a bunch of dry, useless desert. No food, no water, no cities. As Anakin Skywalker once put it, just sand. So that's one option, or, as you see on the map, there's a nicer option. They could take the easier and more rewarding route. They can follow the Tigris River north and hook west through what's called the Fertile Crescent. That path had water and crops and people to colonize, actual value. So that's exactly what they did. They went the long way, but the smart way, which meant Babylon left Edom alone for the most part. But because Babylon left them alone, Edom started to think they had it all figured out. They looked around at their safety, their success, their view from the top, and they took it as a sign that we must be more smarter and stronger and blessed than everyone else, as opposed to being an insignificant nation state that Babylon didn't feel the need to bother with in the grand scheme of things. But that aside, Edom got prideful, and the pride they felt was real. And the sense of superiority not only inflated their ego, but as we will see, it deflated their empathy. Remember Esau's younger brother Jacob? His descendants became the kingdom of Judah. And in 587 BC, Judah was attacked by the Babylonian Empire under King Nebuchadnezzar, and when Nebi launched a year-long siege of the city. If that's a new concept, a siege means surrounding a city with your army and cutting it off from foods and supplies and waiting until the people inside are too weak to fight back or dead. Once Judah was worn down after a year of siege, Nebi and the Babylonians defeated the armies. They exiled all the families, and they ended the Davidic monarchy, and they also destroyed God's temple in Jerusalem as well. Now, you might be wondering, while all of this was going on, what in the world were the Edomites doing? Well, I picture that they were doing something a little like this. Like our favorite Muppets, Statler and Waldorf, the Edomites sat on the sidelines to laugh and jeer and celebrate the destruction of Jacob. Or as Obadiah puts it, on the day you stood aloof while strangers carried off his wealth and foreigners entered his gates and cast lots for Jerusalem, you were like one of them. You should not gloat over your brother in the day of his misfortune, nor rejoice over the people of Judah in the day of their destruction, nor boast so much in the day of their trouble. Now, I'm not trying to say what Edom did was right, but if we want to understand why they acted the way they did, we have to look at their relationship with Judah. So consider this. Your ancestor Esau gets bamboozled by his brother Jacob. And then Jacob becomes the hero of the story. His family grows into a nation of priests and kings chosen by God. And instead of just leaving you alone, their most famous ruler, King David, kills 18,000 members of your army. His top general spends 6 months after that killing all the adult males in your city as further punishment. And then they conquer you and keep you under their thumb until one day they stop, not because they're sorry, but because they don't have the power to do it anymore. That's a lot to work through, right? You can understand after all that generational trauma why Edom always felt second best and mistreated. So when things started going well for them and badly for Judah, it makes sense why they got excited. Seeing Judah fall boosted their own national pride and made Edom feel vindicated, but it also made them less human. Because as they were jeering and celebrating, they didn't pray for anyone. They didn't send any aid. They didn't even take anyone in. They just threw up their hands and said, well, this is what they deserve, so it's not our problem. But here's the dangerous thing about pride. Pride doesn't just lead to our apathy, but it leads to harm. Edom thought so highly of themselves and so little of Judah that they didn't just decide Judah wasn't worth helping. They eventually thought it was perfectly fine to kick them while they were down. Because once you spend enough time convincing yourself that someone isn't worth your compassion, it's only a matter of time before you start believing they deserve your cruelty. And Edom follows that exact path. First, they just stand back and watch, and they just cheer and laugh. Then they start cheering on Judah's fall. And then before long, they're participating in Judah's fall. Here's how Obadiah puts it. You should not march through the gates of my people in the day of their disaster, nor gloat over them in their calamity in the day of their disaster, nor seize their wealth in the day of their disaster. You should not wait at the crossroads to cut down their fugitives, nor hand over their survivors in the day of their trouble. Edom finally gets their chance to get even, and they take it. Babylon comes in and wrecks up the whole place, and Edom's right behind them, taking whatever's left, settling grudges, and selling off any survivors to make a little cash on the side. And that whole time, they were probably thinking, Judah did us dirty for years, so now it's our turn. They got away with it back then, so now we can do whatever we want. But of course, here's the irony of the whole situation. Judah was being destroyed by Babylon because God was punishing them for a pride and a state of mind that said we can do whatever we want. And now Edom is doing the exact same thing. They had no trouble criticizing their younger brother about his pride, his abuse of power, and his faithlessness to God. But then they turn around and become just like Judah. And so the message Obadiah has for Edom is the same one that Judah received. The day of the Lord is near for all nations. As you have done it will be done to you. Your deeds will return upon your own head. Jacob will be a fire and Joseph a flame. Esau will be stubble, and they will set him on fire and destroy him. There will be no survivors from Esau. The Lord has spoken. Here's Obadiah's message. The God who judged Judah for their sins is the same God who will judge Edom. Edom does not get a pass for their cruelty, and as much as they might feel like they deserve one, God will hold them accountable for all the ways they failed to love Judah in their time of need. Now, here's the part of the sermon where you're probably wondering, all right, that's a really great overview of the book of Obadiah. Now I know what it's all about. But what does that have to do with my relationship with Jesus? And what next steps do I take from this? And I'm so glad that you asked. So let me put it all together for you in these last moments. Obadiah is just one of many instances where we see this pattern play out throughout Scripture, where the older brother, due to his pride and hurt, fails to show up for his younger brother. Let me show you how this pattern works. Cain kills Abel. Ishmael mocks Isaac. Joseph's brothers sell him into slavery, right? Aaron undermines Moses' leadership. Eliab tells David to get lost when he tries to help with Goliath. Amnon assaulted his own sister and Absalom kills him for it. Adonijah tries to take the throne for Solomon before King David's even gone. And all along, throughout all of this, with repeated instance after instance after instance, Scripture's been asking the same question over and over again. Who's going to be his brother's keeper? Who is going to not allow their pride to inflate their ego, deflate their empathy, and cause harm? Obadiah gives us a hint about the answer. Here's the last verse of Obi-Wan Kenobi. Deliverers will go up on Mount Zion to govern the mountains of Esau, and the kingdom will be the Lord's. At first glance, it sounds like Obadiah is saying that eventually a group of warriors, or maybe even a king, these deliverers are going to go up and take back Jerusalem, put Edom in its place, and then God will reign. And if you're on Team Judah, and your life has been flipped up and turned upside down by Edom, you're thinking, oh, thank goodness, God is going to deal with our problematic brother. Let's gather everyone together, call the cousins, pop some popcorn. Edom's going to get whipped. This is going to be great. But then about 500 years later, we see in the Gospels that God doesn't send a warrior. He doesn't send a king, at least in the traditional sense. He sends an older brother into Jerusalem. He sends Jesus. And why? The New Testament puts it like this. God, for whom and through whom everything was made, chose to bring many children into glory. And it was only right that he should make Jesus, through his suffering, a perfect leader, fit to bring them into salvation. So now Jesus and the ones he makes holy have the same Father. That is why Jesus is not ashamed to call them his brothers and sisters. Just like Edom, Jesus was the firstborn in his family. And just like Edom, Jesus was wronged and mistreated. But unlike Edom, Jesus looked at the suffering of his younger brothers and sisters in the world and he moved towards it. He didn't say, I'll just stay up here in heaven and watch things fall apart for you, even though he had every right to do that. And he didn't come down to take advantage of our weaknesses, but as the true older brother, Jesus took on our sin, our death, our exile from God. He suffered the hell we deserved so he could bring us into salvation, make us holy, and welcome us into the family to call us his own. For those of us who have been saved by Jesus and who are now called brothers and sisters by him, the message of Obadiah isn't just don't be an Edom. It's also a call to become like Jesus, to be the brother and sister that this world desperately needs. Now, I know it's easy to start thinking, oh, I'm no Cain, I'm no Edom, I don't have pride, I don't think too highly of myself, but I would tell you that according to Obadiah's definition, pride isn't just about how flashy we are, but it's also about what we are willing to ignore. Let me just put it to you this way. If you've ever expressed, that's not my problem, or it's good they're getting what they deserve, or it's a shame they didn't do it the right way, Obadiah will tell you that is a pride issue. That is literally you and I saying, I'm not my brother's keeper. I'm not my sister's keeper. And that's a really comfortable way to live. I'll admit that. I struggle with this. The idea that I'm only responsible for looking after Jill, a few friends I choose, and the members of this church who give above $1 million, that's really easy. It's easy to love and care for and forgive those of you who I want to because it benefits me, and it's easy for you to do that for other people when it benefits you. It's also easy to categorize everyone else as not worth your time or attention. But what's not easy is doing exactly what Jesus did. He dwelt on a throne higher than even the mountains of Edom, yet he chose to descend into the lowest places life can take us, not just so we could praise him, but so we could follow him and be on mission with him. And if you want to worship this God in Jesus, if you want to follow this God and become like this God, you don't get to stay prideful on the mountaintops. You also got to love someone down in the valley. So who in your life have you labeled not your problem? Is there anyone that out of your pride you may have categorized as deserves what they get? Or is there someone you only feel apathy, resentment, or malice toward? And if so, remember Obadiah's lessons this morning. If life is a multiple choice test, pride is always the wrong answer. It inflates our ego, deflates our empathy, and it harms everyone. But the right answer is always to name and confess our pride. Because when we do that, it reminds us of who we are in Jesus. We are a people saved by grace and sustained by his new mercies every morning. And if we can keep that truth at the forefront of our minds, it kills our pride, it grows our compassion, and it allows God to use us to be a blessing to one another.